Okay, we're going to tackle a pretty hefty subject today, which is why are some nations rich and why are other nations poor? Now, I'm not going to answer that completely today, and today is going to be kind of an oversimplified version of that. Um, but I want to talk about what are some qualities that lead to prosperity versus poverty. Um, so, The first thing we're going to talk about is factors of production. Now, if you're doing something else right now, if you're zoned out, you should zone in. This is something that we're going to come back to throughout the course. So you need to focus. You should probably actually memorize these four things. Okay? I'll wait. All right. So let's talk about the factors of production. These are what we need to produce goods and services. Now, again, we talked about earlier, if we produce more, we're able to consume more. So, what's going to allow us to be able to produce more? Well, one of the things is natural resources. Um, so, oil, lumber, water, land, um, you know, all sorts of stuff that we can use those resources to to fulfill our wants and needs. Now, it should be said that just because your country has natural resources doesn't mean you're going to be rich. There's actually nations that don't have a lot of natural resources that have done incredibly well, and there's nations that have done, um, you know, have had lots of resources and have done very poorly. But all else equal, ceteris paribus, as we learned the other day, if you have more natural resources, you're going to be able to produce more, and you're going to be more prosperous as a nation. Um, the next thing is labor. The more labor you have, the more you're able to produce. Now, unlike some of the other things on this list, if we increase our amount of labor, um, that is going to increase how much we produce, but it also increases how much we can consume, at least if we're talking about having more people. So, this won't actually make you more prosperous to have more people. Um, Now, it might make you more prosperous if you have more people working. So if you have unemployment or something, and you put people back to work, that's going to obviously be better as far as production goes. Um, Capital. This is kind of the big lever that countries get to actually um, adjust. And there's lots of policies that you can enact that allow for more capital, or in command economies, you can just build capital. But the human capital and physical capital that we talked about, if we have more of that, then we can use the same amount of natural resources, the same amount of labor, and we can get much more production out of it. So, any policies that encourage capital growth, um, whether that's um, giving businesses incentives to build these factories, to build all of this, or something like education and job training, all that kind of stuff. All those things lead to more capital and more production, and theoretically, more prosperity in your nation, at least material prosperity. The last thing is entrepreneurial ability. So, entrepreneurs basically are the people who put this capital, this labor, these natural resources. They're the ones who take all those things, put them all together, and make a product. Okay. They're the ones who say, oh, I've got this, this, and this. So let me make Tesla. I've got this, this, and this. Let me make Amazon. Okay. Without the entrepreneurs, all this stuff doesn't wind up happening. Okay. Um, so it's very important to encourage entrepreneurship. Now, how we do that is a little tricky. There are things that we can do like lower tax rates. There are things like, you know, not having too many sticky regulations on stuff to encourage entrepreneurs to um, basically work in your country. But a lot of this is tricky for a nation to encourage. So again, we've got natural resources, labor, capital, entrepreneurial ability. If we have more of any of these, we're going to be able to produce more. If we have less of any of these, we're going to be able to produce less. Okay? Now, one of the other things that we need is lots of infrastructure. And this could be physical infrastructure, water, power, sewer, internet, roads, all these things. This could also mean education, courts, military, police, um, fire. All of these things make production easier. All of these things are um, are necessary if you want to have the kind of economic growth that leads to prosperity. Um, and all of these things require taxes. So I know that we like to yell about taxes, but if your taxes are too low, where you can't build infrastructure, where you can't create all of these things, well, that's a problem. Now there is some infrastructure that is built privately, and there's some that lends itself to that. There's others that just doesn't make any sense for a private enterprise to build. Um, and you need that tax revenue in order to build infrastructure. So there's kind of this sweet spot in taxes where you don't want it to be low enough that you can't build infrastructure, and you don't want it to be high enough where you're killing entrepreneurship and kind of choking out private investment. The next really big thing is legal protections. Okay, it is incredibly important that we have laws and that they're well enforced. There's not like corruption in the courts or in the ranks of the police, because well enforced laws make it more profitable to be a producer than just a moocher. So imagine you got two people. One of them works really, really hard, builds up all this wealth, gets nice things for themselves, but also is providing services for the community. And then another person comes with a gun and takes all of the things that they work so hard for. Well, you have the person who's producing for their community, and you have the person who's stealing from the community, and the person who's stealing from community is better off. Well, people respond to incentives. If you have people who are producing who aren't profiting, and you have people who are mooching who are profiting, well, people are going to adjust. I don't think most people want to steal, but put in a dire enough situation, you see people respond to these incentives. Um, and in a lot of areas, you see lots of corruption within the police force, lots of bribery, um, lots of bribery for police and for the courts. Um, so areas that have this have very stifled economic growth because the rule of law isn't going on. Another big important thing is property rights. It's very important that private property is not confiscated. Because again, let's say you've got this guy over here and he builds this awesome factory and does all of this stuff. And then this dictator comes along and says, "That is a wonderful factory that you built. I am going to take that and have a nice day." What does that do to the incentive to build up all this physical capital that we've learned is so important? Well, it kills it. You're just not going to spend millions and millions of dollars building machineries and factory and all this stuff. You're just not going to do it. So, um, giving citizens the knowledge that if they build something awesome, they get to keep it. That is a really important idea um, for a prosperous nation. Otherwise, it kills incentives. Now, let's talk a little bit about eminent domain, because this is where things get a little murky here. Um, so, there's a lot of times where government is trying to build infrastructure, which we've learned is very important: roads, bridges, internet, whatever. And because of what's going on, it needs to go through someone's property. Well, if they can't go through that property, it could potentially derail the whole project. Like, hey, I can't go through here, so I'm gonna have to either like take this expensive path around, or eventually you just go, I just can't do this without this property. So what they do is they ask the person, "Hey, can I buy this property?" And some people go, "No, I want to keep living here. And so either we let this derail the project, we either pay them way, way, way too much money, or eventually the government just says, look, we need this property. We're going to buy it from you. You have to go. So, um, so that's what eminent domain is. Now, it's a rough thing whether this is a kind of a good thing or a bad thing, because on the one side, it kind of damages property rights. Um, and it just seems kind of shady. But on the other hand, we need to build infrastructure. So generally, eminent domain is something that hopefully should be very much a last resort for governments. Um, Something else that's important is even-handed contract enforcement. Um, let's say there's a contract, and this person says, "Oh, well, I'm going to pay you 1.5 billion, and you're going to give me 500 million thingies." Okay, and we make a trade, and trade is good. Yes, we've encouraged trade, but this guy says, "Okay, I've taken your 1.5 billion, and I'm actually not going to give you the 500,000 thingies." So what does this guy over here do? He says, "Okay, well, I'm going to take you to court." And this guy says, "Okay." And then he goes to the judge, slips him a cool $1 million, and says, "I want you um, to rule in my favor." And this guy still benefits because he made off with 1.5 billion, and the judge benefits because he makes 1 million. But this guy is completely hosed, and all of a sudden, people aren't making contracts anymore because no one can trust each other because of the courts not being fair. So even-handed contract enforcement is really, really super important to prosperity. And places where you don't see that, you're not going to see that kind of growth. Another thing that's very important is stability. Businesses like to know what's going to happen because they have to make long-term plans. Now, we businesses are really good at adapting, but every adaptation that you have to make is costly. You don't want to build this factory and then realize, oh no, the laws changed. I don't want my factory here. I want my factory somewhere else. Or I need to change this thing. Um, so having stability in leadership really helps these businesses know what they need to do. So anytime the laws are really jerky and they're always changing, this is going to be bad for business. Businesses want consistent standards. Um, and so I know this isn't everything that you need to know, but this is a good overview of why some nations wind up being poor and others wind up being rich. So thank you very much.